1988 Goodrich Band concert tour of Mexico began at about 3 a.m. on the morning of March 31st with a bus ride to Chicago's O'Hare International Airport. 100 Goodrich Band members and a staff of 12 adults were on their way for 8 days south of the border. Mexicana has been the airline for the band's 5 tours of Mexico. We enjoyed a choice of pancakes or omelets for breakfast on the flight, and were pleasantly surprised when we landed in the Yucatán city of Merida. Temperatures at Fond du Lac were in the low 40s when we left, but stepping off the plane in Merida, we were greeted by humid mid-80s. The bright red band t-shirts were welcome dress for the hot Mexican day. Band members soon began making friends with local natives, even if there weren't many people at the airport. Director Cal Moely had the first of several opportunities for publicity of the concert tour with a television interview while we were still at the airport. Our coach buses soon arrived to take us to our hotel for the first 3 nights of the tour. The pool at the Maria del Carmen Hotel was welcome, and an afternoon dip was followed by an introduction to our guide for the stay at Merida. That was followed by the first of several delicious meals at the hotel. Our dinners consisted of 3-course meals, soup, an entree, and dessert, and our breakfasts were buffets, complete with hotcakes, bacon, eggs, ham, cereal, toast, coffee, juice, and always plenty of fresh fruit. Of course, that was pineapple, cantaloupe, and papaya. That evening, many of the band members and staff took a walking tour of the Zócalo, or Central Square and Park of the city. We stopped at the Government Palace, where we would play a Sunday concert. The palace was a beautiful white building with an open central court and balcony. It would have been an excellent concert site, but as we soon learned, not all plans made in Mexico go through. We also saw the city's cathedral and paid a visit there. This day was Maundy Thursday and is celebrated as a religious holiday in Mexico, with most all shops and stores closed and people attending church. There would be many curiosities in Mexico. One of the first was this truck at the Zócalo delivering soda, but with the familiar word Oreo as the brand name. Friday was our first tour of an archaeological site. We would visit the ruins and temples at Uxmal, probably the best example of Mayan architecture in all of Mexico. We traveled by bus through several small towns where the people were preparing for Good Friday celebrations. It's quite common for Mexicans to reenact the crucifixion in the square of their towns. On the way to Uxmal, we passed several adobe and wood huts with thatched roofs. These are common dwellings of the natives of the area and are single-room houses. There's no electricity and no running water, just a well for all the people in the village, and only a main roadway and dirt walkways. Although these people live in what we would think of as deep poverty, they're quite educated. Mexico provides free education for grades 1 through 12 at quite modern schools, and if someone wishes to continue their education at college, the government will also pay for that. The only requirement is that the graduate give 1 year of work to the government without pay. Our first glimpse of Uxmal was the main temple, the Temple of the Wizard. Legend has it that the temple was constructed in a single night using the magic powers of one of the Mayan people, a sorcerer. We had 3 guides for this tour. Our guide, Luis, gave us a very interesting history of what is known of the Uxmal site. Uxmal was a religious center. The people lived in huts very much like the ones we had seen on the way to the temples. Outside the Uxmal complex is where they lived, and life has changed little since the years of 500 to 900 AD, when this was an active center of the Mayan culture and religion. Only the most important people of the community lived here: the governor in his elaborately carved palace and the priests of the Mayan religion.
By the way, Uxmal started to be occupied approximately 500 years after Christ. So that is, the best of the Mayan classical period from 5 to 900. So in Uxmal, in this area, there's no good facilities for water. We don't have rivers in the whole Yucatán Peninsula. But in Uxmal, There's no wells at all, except when you visit Chichén Itzá. So the Mayans here, they use the natural formations, and also when they quarry, you know, the sandstone, for using that to make mortar, for glue, for putting on the stones. So they reuse those walls, put in a plaster this thick, about 5 centimeters or 3 inches, you know, thick, all over the interior of caves in natural holes. So they use that for reservoirs and cisterns. Uxmal has temples decorated with the symbols of the rain god. The symbols, they look like an elephant trunk, and eyes and eyelashes, you know, and mouth and teeth. And that face represents several things, you know.
Luis pointed out the extent of Mayan architecture, the fact that the building skills were quite advanced. The Mayans were able to construct a corbel, or false arch, not the true arch that the Romans built or that we see in Gothic churches, but an arch nevertheless. We also saw remarkable carvings on the restored walls of the governor's palace, where tens of thousands of stones were placed on the facade of the palace. Over the years, archaeologists have done an amazing job of making the stones that, due to weather and growth of the jungle around the site, had become little more than a pile of rubble, taking them and putting them back together as they once were. While exploring the governor's palace, we also had a chance to observe some native wildlife. In among the stones, you can see a large iguana. He sat so motionless for so long, some of the band members were convinced that he was really carved out of the stones. Many of the guides made it a challenge to climb all the available pyramids and temples. One particular structure at Uxmal is called the Nunnery. This name was given by the first Spaniards to see the ruins. They named the building for the many small rooms in the 4 sides. They reminded them of the cloistered convents of their homeland. There's an interesting acoustical property to this building. When you stand in the center of the 4 walls and clap your hands, the sound is amplified and echoes many, many times. 20 people clapping can sound like 60. These walls, too, have been covered with elaborate carvings and stonework. One wall shows a large snake intertwined from one end of the wall to the other. The snake represented life to the Mayan people and was an often repeated symbol. This particular snake ends with the tail near the mouth and a figure of a man emerging from the mouth, a symbol of new birth. From the top of the Temple of the Wizard, it's easy to see the surrounding jungle. Not a tropical, steamy jungle like we see in Tarzan movies, but thick, short trees and brush. Several band members made it to the top of the tallest structure at Uxmal. But the return trip down was another problem. It took a bit more thought and care, since the steps are very, very shallow, only 3 to 4 inches deep and as much as 8 or 9 inches tall. When we returned to the hotel, everyone got out their instruments for a 15-minute practice session. Not having played since Wednesday, fingers and embouchures needed a bit of limbering up before Saturday's first concert in the Park of the Americas. At first, it all seemed like total chaos. Warming up exercises, scales, and the like. Some of the other guests around the pool where we practiced looked concerned. Well, that is until the tuba section launched into the familiar bass line of Bud. The whole band joined in, and American guests and Mexican hotel workers joined in clapping in time to the music. One of the guests from the United States told us that she was a band mother and had been for years. Nothing sounded so much like home as the band warming up and playing. That was the first of many such compliments the Goodrich bandsmen would receive from other United States citizens and visitors while we were in Mexico. Saturday evening was our first concert opportunity. We played in a wonderful band shell in the Park of the Americas. The acoustics were great. Although the seating area was long and narrow, all the instruments could be heard as clearly as in our own theater. We did have one big problem at this concert, however. That was the wind. Although the temperatures did not moderate much at night, the wind was strong enough to cool us a little bit. But that wasn't as bad as all the music blowing off the music stands and all over the stage area. There was a reporter at this concert from one of the regional newspapers in the Yucatán Peninsula, and she sought out two of the staff members and interviewed them during the concert. The reporter didn't speak much English, and the staff member spoke less Spanish, but ideas were communicated, and the next day we found the article in a local paper. We had also found another article earlier that day telling of the upcoming concert. That made 3 bits of publicity the Goodrich bands received while they were in Mexico. When we think of an evening's entertainment here in Fond du Lac, that could mean anything from a night of bowling, card playing, softball in the summer, maybe even an evening in front of the television. Now, while there is television in Mexico, it's not nearly as common as it is in our homes. So the Mexican people look for other forms of entertainment, and one of the most popular for them is live music. In the parks, in the squares or zocolos, street musicians, mariachi bands on a Saturday evening. That's why the concerts that the band presents are such a great learning experience and such a reward. The Mexican people receive the music with a warmth that we are not used to. Adults, children, even the babies get into the spirit of the music, clapping, sometimes singing along, truly enjoying the evening. At the end of the concert, the band received its first, but far from last, standing ovation. The crowd even asked for otra, more, an encore. We gladly obliged with 2 favorites. The popular Bud song, which had staff members doing an impromptu polka, and Tequila, a hit in Mexico, and there was a conga line on stage. Despite the heat and the wind, the kids could be proud of their musicianship and pleased with the reaction and reception by the audience. The next day was one of rearranged schedules. Changes and a concert in the park in the shade of trees. Our original plans called for the band to give a sacred concert in a Baptist church in Merida. That was changed at the last minute by the senior pastor, who decided it would be better if the concert were in the evening. Well, this not only created conflict with a concert scheduled for the government palace, but also caused a problem with our bus ride to our lodging in Chichén Itzá. Unfortunately, we had to cancel the sacred concert. That meant the time of the concert at the government palace would be at noon. When we arrived at the concert site, we found that the area we were to play in had been transformed into a small marketplace. The alternatives were to move all the vendors, or play in the street under the noontime sun, or set up in the shade of one of the large trees in the park. This turned out to be the best idea. The audience completely encircled the band, with little children reaching out and touching the band members and instruments. It was a very hot day, and it was agreed by the staff that it might not be a bad idea to allow the boys to play the concert in their shirt sleeves. Even Mr. Moely gave in to the heat and conducted a little more comfortably. This concert location gave the band a chance to see Mexican people close up. Several ladies sitting behind the trombones at one point turned their fans on the boys to help cool them off. Children climbed to the tree to see better. People clapped and smiled. Our musicians became one with the audience on several selections. We could see the appreciation on the faces of everyone gathered there. Here was an example of what Mexican people do on a Sunday afternoon. They enjoy the outdoors and music in the central park of their community. After the concert, several of the bandsmen talked with people. Several Mexicans spoke a fair amount of English, and with some broken Spanish from our kids, a cultural barrier and a language barrier were broken. There were people visiting from the United States. They expressed their pleasant surprise at the quality of musicianship. And one lady told us their school in Texas had planned a similar concert tour, but because a few parents objected to the idea, the entire tour was canceled. These parents took the money that they had already invested in their daughter's trip and brought her to Mexico on their own. They felt it would have been a wonderful idea if their band could have had this type of experience. It's time to go back to the hotel, load buses, and be off to the most famous archaeological site in the Western Hemisphere, Chichén Itzá. This was a long ride, 2 hours through hot jungle areas. But the first sight of the Great Pyramid at Chichén Itzá revived everyone. People in the area have an interesting way of controlling traffic speeds. There are many tiny villages between Merida and Chichén Itzá, and between Chichén Itzá and Cancun. 2 or 3 sets of what we would call speed bumps are placed across the roadway in each little town. Cars, buses, and trucks are forced to slow down to cross these. One of our guides told us they kept traffic slowed down in these towns, lowered the traffic death rate, and were affectionately called silent policemen. He also called them by their Americanized names, Dolly Partons. We arrived at Chichén Itzá just in time for a quick swim, supper, and the light show at the Great Pyramid. Through a tape recording in 5-channel stereo, sound and colored lights shining on the pyramid, the Temple of the Thousand Columns, and the sacrificial platforms, the history of the Mayan people in the area was related. Different voices came from different locations on the vast courtyard, before the ancient structure and the music came from atop the pyramid. It's quite a spectacle to end the day. There was a full moon to give an eerie feeling to the telling of the ancient tales of young children and warriors being sacrificed, of having their hearts cut out while they still lived, how sacrifices were made to Chak, the rain god. We would learn more of this the next day on our guided tour of the area. After a delicious breakfast of Mexican cooking, French toast, and rancheros, we were off on a guided tour of Chichén Itzá. Most of us were pronouncing the site as Chichen Itza. Our guide corrected us. He was fluent in Spanish, English, and the most common language of the area, Mayan. Chichén Itzá was correct. The name is actually 4 Mayan words. Chi and Chen combine to mean wizards of water, and I and Tza together mean people of the well. So Chichén Itzá indicated the wizards of water of the people of the well. Chichén Itzá today is actually the remains of Toltec buildings constructed after the Toltecs invaded the Mayas. The Mayas were quite peaceful people. Their need for water is based on the fact that they were farmers, not warriors. Inside the great temple, there is another, smaller temple, an older one, to the god Chak, the rain god. You see this by entering a narrow, steep, and damp crawl space. Behind the representation of Chak is a beautiful carved jaguar throne. Set into the jaguar are large jade stones. Jade is not native to this part of the world, but actually came from China centuries ago. After the Toltecs came, the religion of the two cultures was combined. The Toltec god Quetzalcoatl translated into the Mayan Kulkulkan. And that's when the human sacrifices began. Actually, there were 2 types of sacrifice. The Mayans played a kind of ball game that seems to have been a combination of football, hockey, and basketball. And the object seems to have been to get a rubber ball through a circular stone ring. The game was played on a court. At one end sat the priest and other important rulers. At the other were the teams and their coaches. Here there's another interesting acoustic phenomenon. A single clap of the hands at the center of the court produces at least 13 distinct echoes. This allowed the coach to stand at one end and talk to his ball players. We don't know how many goals made up a game or how long a game lasted. We do know that one of the teams was sacrificed after it was all over. Carvings on the wall of the court show ball players in full uniform with shoulder and knee pads, helmets, bats, and small shuttle-like tools. Other carvings show a warrior holding the head of another player. and still another shows the decapitated warrior. In each case, the blood of the players becomes snakes, the sign of renewed life. It appears that in battles, the captives were taken alive and brought back to the ceremonial grounds. They were apparently executed or sacrificed on platforms. Skulls around one platform may indicate those sacrificed or represent a number of sacrifices. Several yards from the ceremonial grounds is the sacred cenote, or well. Excavations into the sacred well have recovered bones, human bones, jewelry, and gold. Our guide told us of these sacrifices.
They believed that Chag, the rain god, lived down there. So they made the human sacrifices here to get rain. According to the legends, they only sacrificed girls. But the studies made to the human skeletons, they tell us that mostly children were sacrificed. They were between 4 and 12 years old when they killed them. Before they killed them, they drugged the victims with an alcoholic beverage. So when they were drunk, they killed them, so they cut their hair out from that temple, and they throw them in. They have a lot of jewelry, and they tied very heavy stones on their legs to weigh them down. The bottom of the well already has been explored. The first digging was made by Thompson, Edward Thompson. He was the vice consul from the States in Yucatán at the end of the last century. He was the man who bought Chichen Itza at about $100. He explored the well.
At another part of the site, we saw the remains of a burial tomb for a priest. This temple has been only partially excavated and is yet to be restored. It's one of the few temples that was used for burial. Another remarkable structure is the observatory. Here the Mayans plotted the phases of the moon and the sun. The steps of the Great Pyramid multiplied by the 4 sides equal 364. The top step makes 365, the number of days in the year. The days of the summer and winter solstice from this observatory, and when the sun sets on these particular days, a shadow and image of the steps of one corner form an undulating body of a serpent. A carved snake's head at the bottom completes that serpent. Another symbol of light, this time descending to earth. From the top of the observatory, there are other great views of the site. The Temple of the 1,000 Columns. The Ball Court. Before he left us, our guide gave us a demonstration comparing the 3 languages of the area, Spanish, English, and Mayan.
Bashkamendik, ¿qué haces? What you're doing. Now, I think that the nicest question in Maya is for, how are you? Is Bishabel, which means, how is the way of your life? And the answer for that, if you are okay, is Tohin Wo. Tohin Wo, that means my way goes straight, so I'm okay. Yeah. To say thanks is Yumbotik. God is gonna pay you. You're welcome is Mishba. You're welcome. To say goodbye is pretty long. Hey, Kilikbye. Goodbye. Now, depends on how you pronounce each word. Different accents for the same word. It means something different. For example, the word kan, C-A-N, for kukulkan means snake. Now, kan means snake, kan means 4, kan high, kan yellow, and kan hammock. It's kan. See, it's just like Chinese, the Mandarin, that also has different variations and different meanings. Maya language is the same thing. If you say takin, softer, see, takin means I want to do something. Like in means money. So that's Maya language, and all the people around here speak Maya and Spanish, so it's still spoken. What I want to tell you now is Heikelikpai. Goodbye.
After our language lesson, the entire band formed up at the base of the Great Pyramid. And there in our red band t-shirts, now something of a trademark, 100 band members and staff formed a giant red letter F on the steps. Cameras clicked and whirred, and another reporter happened to be on the grounds and talked with Mr. Moely once again about the tour. The reporter also took pictures of the letter F for his paper. Still more good press for the band. And then it was back to the hotel to pack and head for Cancun. The trip to Cancun was another long and hot one. Mexican bus drivers always had the air conditioning on when we first boarded the bus. But as soon as we were on the road, off went the cool air and the windows had to be opened. We had to have some breeze. This time it was a 3-hour trip to the beaches of Cancun. When we arrived at the Hotel Intercontinental, we found that not all our rooms were ready. A lot of credit goes to the members of the concert band for their maturity and patience during the 2 hours it took to get everything straightened out. After a long and hot trip, the showers and pool looked so nice, but everyone waited. Although we were getting edgy, all were excellent representatives of their school, community, and nation. 2 other visitors from the United States made a point of telling staff members and students how well they handled themselves under the circumstances. One lady said that she would never consider such a trip, but if she knew the kids would be as mature as these, she'd certainly consider it. Another gentleman told us he was from Wausau, a former teacher, and he was doubly impressed with the bandsman's conduct. Although Cancun is the major resort area on the east coast of Mexico, it was not all fun and sun. There was time for enjoying the beach and experiencing new thrills. There was the red flag undertow of the ocean. There was the volleyball game on the beach. And there was parasailing. Most found this easy as well as fun, except for one member of the trip whose light weight was no match for the stiff breeze off the water and the lifting power of the parachute. Others found jet skiing to be a great pastime. That evening, the band presented its 3rd concert. We followed the Cancun Municipal Band. The audience crowded around us, and the concert was received with a great feeling of appreciation. The municipal band that we followed stayed for our concert, and even their director had great things to say. One of the members of the percussion section was even asked to play cymbals the next afternoon at a bullfight. Their regular cymbal player would not be available, so the band director asked if one of our guys could help them out. Arrangements were made, and the percussionist was picked up by taxi and returned to the hotel. Quite a compliment for the band as a whole and for our percussion section. Wednesday was our last full day in Mexico. We were scheduled to visit the remains at Tulum in the morning, but one of the now famous quirks of Mexican time and planning found us with only one of the 3 buses needed to take us there. Some quick arrangements got several suburban-type vans and cars to our hotel, and we were off. The site at Tulum is a smaller one and located right on the ocean. From there we drove to Xel-Há, where we could rent masks, snorkels, and fins to swim in a large lagoon inhabited by ocean fish. The crystal clear water and snorkel gear made an exciting afternoon. Back at the Intercontinental, it was time to prepare for our final concert. We would play in the Plaza de la Reforma, the Plaza of the Revolution, directly in front of the mayor's office. This was a large open space with lots of light and room, and was perhaps our finest concert of the tour. Although the audience was not as large as some that we had played for, they were perhaps the most receptive. Children came right up to the band and watched with wide eyes as the students played. This, the last time these 100 musicians would ever play together as the Goodrich Concert Band. 3 encores were played, the familiar Bud and Tequila, and the band's own Tuba Special. A standing ovation for the band for the end of their final concert appearance. One more opportunity for notoriety presented itself after this concert. Members of the mayor's staff asked Mr. Moely to come to the mayor's office right after the concert. When he met the mayor, His Honor was most gracious and grateful for having the band perform in his city. He extended a welcome to return in the future, and he also expressed the concern that when the Goodrich Band returns, he will see that there are no transportation problems. Next morning, it was time for final packing of souvenirs, clothes, and gifts to be brought back. A trip to the Cancun airport, and boarding the plane for the flight home. Many good memories remain for the Goodrich Concert Band. Many valuable lessons were learned. Meeting new people, eating differently prepared food, dealing with a foreign currency, shopping where the price is not fixed and you can bargain over the cost. These kids, as we call them, changed over the course of 8 days away from home. Many had never been out of the state of Wisconsin. Many never away from parents for that long. All learned a great deal. They learned about other people and another land and culture, and they learned about themselves. They learned things that cannot be taught from books or in classrooms. They learned about responsibility to themselves and to each other, and to the band as a musical unit. None of these 100 youngsters will ever be quite the same after these 8 days. It's a tribute to the Fond du Lac School District and its administration for making this tour possible. It's a tribute to all the music teachers of the district who prepare these musicians so well. To the staff members who so readily and willingly gave their time and efforts on the trip to ensure that things go smoothly and that the kids learn and have a good time. And to the parents of the students for providing the chance for them to participate in a once-in-a-lifetime experience. And finally, it's a tribute to the band members themselves, young men and women who, as ambassadors representing Goodrich High School, Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, and above all the United States, were an excellent example of the good and positive things that our youth are doing. To Cal Moely and the Goodrich Band, muy bueno, muchas gracias, hasta la vista. Well done, thank you, and until we meet again.